It is 11:20 and we are back on the air, it feels like. So we were trying to figure out what to do with the lunch period, and we thought rather than just have dead air, we would have something that might be of interest to folks as they're nibbling away. And Doug Poad had the idea of having a kind of a panel discussion about how to incorporate climate considerations into the MTP. So Doug and Tim, Doug Poad, Tim Stroshine, Michael Thompson, all from our staff, our transportation staff, are going to kind of host that, and we will be encouraging you and receiving comments and questions via text, which Aria will then share with Doug, Tim, and Michael. So now I will move it right on over to Doug, who will start us off.
Good morning, everyone. First of all, I'd like to introduce myself. I'm Doug. If I can get it right, Tim on this side here and Michael on this side here. First off, old movie that I remember from Robin Williams' time. Hello, Vietnam. Hello, MPOers. I didn't get that quite right, but hopefully that does get your attention. As David said earlier, when we were discussing what to do over the lunch period, we had a number of ideas. We thought, well, one of them was what can we do as MPO planners to actually take all of this information that we're getting about climate change, and there is a lot. For example, even today when I was reading this morning on the news that the second largest lake in Turkey is actually bone dry right now, which is pretty sad. But anyway, we are getting a lot of information about climate change, and we were discussing what can we do as planners to start making changes here locally. And you probably don't know or may know that right now we are in the process of developing a new MTP, and that's going to be one important part of it. For example, I have some ideas. Of course, one of them is pretty standard in terms of trying to reduce the use of single vehicle occupancy cars, and then also reduce vehicles. And then also thinking about our road network. If we do have more heavy rain events, how is that going to affect our bridges, specifically ones that cross major rivers? And then also those low-lying area roads that provide major connections to various points. We need to look at those more seriously. And those are just a couple of my ideas, but I'd like to hand this off now to Michael and kind of give you an idea of what he and what we are coming up with in our 2050 MTP. And then after that, open it up to all of you. If we could go, MPO by MPO and tell us what you either have included in your MTP, if you're working on it, what you are or thinking about including, and then if you are going to be starting it soon, if you have any thoughts already about how to address climate change. With all the great staff that we have around the state, I'm sure there are a lot of ideas, and to be honest, I know that we'll probably hear, or I hope we do hear, a couple from this discussion that we could probably steal and actually use in our plan, because it's always great to get thoughts and comments from others. Unfortunately, we don't have the ability to actually discuss this using our voice. So if you could, again, type in what you liked, what you're thinking about, what you have done in the chat, so then we can actually share that. And basically, this is just more or less a kickback. Please, if you'd like to help yourself, eat your lunch. So now I'm going to just have Michael then tell us a little bit about what we're thinking of doing with our MTP. So please.
Thank you. So as we worked on our 2050 plan, we have made it a point to integrate both resilience with sustainability. So we've been able to do a number of projects to incorporate that. So one of the things that we did was participation within the Environmental Resilience Institutes, or ERI's resilience cohort through Indiana University. And this gave us access to experts in the field and technical resources that could better assist us in building our plan. Our membership in a peer network so that we could discuss, as we are now, with other MPOs and to see what they're doing and to assist each other. And training through ICLEI and local governments for sustainability, which is a nonprofit here in Indiana. So by participating, we were able to focus on our vision of resiliency. And so some of the things that includes is floodplain management, our ecological restoration, asset management, reduction of heat island effect, and alternative fuel and vehicle technology investments. So our goals, especially with this last point, were to reduce vehicle miles traveled, also to lower greenhouse gas emissions through fuel, and to support investment in innovative vehicle technology. So this includes an electric vehicle infrastructure and the future potential for autonomous vehicles. So another thing that we were able to do is to participate in the Hoosier Resilience Index Readiness Assessment. So we gathered local government officials that represented various areas of concern, and we were able to work together and gather results to calculate and show how prepared we are. And the areas that we looked at were concerns of extreme heat, extreme precipitation, and flood management. Next, we completed a greenhouse gas inventory so that we could identify our major sources of greenhouse gases and associated emissions. Our focus was on the amount of energy that was consumed, our diversity of energy supplied to the grid, our vehicle fuel use, and the amount of waste that was generated. In studying this, we found that our major sources were industrial sources first, residential, commercial energy, transportation and mobile services, energy associated with solid waste, as well as water and wastewater, and agriculture, forestry, and other land use. So currently, we are working on including a Greater Lafayette Climate Action Plan in our 2050 plan. And so right now, where we are with that is completing our first community survey to garner resident feedback. And then also we are preparing to host focus groups so that we can better understand many of the areas of concerns that residents have, whether it be land use, the built environment, or workforce preparedness. And I also want to include Tim, if there is anything else that you would like to add about our 2050 plan.
Yeah, so just a few things to mention about that. So one of the things we did when we first started development of this plan was to look at some overall goals and objectives for the plan. And one of those was to increase environmental resilience and sustainability. So that's kind of some of the foundation as to why we're doing this. And like Michael said, the public outreach aspect of this has been very important. Certainly it's important to us as planners to kind of have this sort of effort going on, but we want to know, how important is it to the public and what is the public interested in? What are their concerns? So we've been able to get some good partnerships going with some citizens in regard to that, and we've got some really good feedback as far as that aspect of things goes. So we're glad to see that, and I think at this time, maybe this would be a good chance to pause for questions if there are any, and if not, we'll hop right back in and continue to discuss. But have any questions come in?
Okay, I don't see any questions at this time, but I guess as a question of my own, did you want to talk a little bit about the public outreach that you did for the climate aspects? Like what sorts of methods we used to reach the public and how successful those were?
Sure. So a lot of what we've been doing has been through online surveys. We had kind of hoped to do some more in-person outreach with this plan. That hasn't really been feasible with the pandemic and some of the variants and all these things that have come through. So that kind of got removed a little bit from our kind of suite of options. So we've had to focus more on our online outreach. We're also looking right now to start up some stakeholder groups to get kind of some specific feedback. And one of those areas where we think we're really going to be able to make some progress in is kind of improving bicycle and pedestrian infrastructure. We really want to make our community more multimodal. We know that that's helpful for many reasons, one of which, of course, being that it doesn't burn all those fossil fuels and create those terrible emissions that, you know, we all kind of hear about on the news. So currently here in Tippecanoe County, we are an entertainment area. So we do not have any CMAQ funds. We're kind of trying our best to keep it that way. We'd like to stay in entertainment. We believe that one way we can do that is through increasing our trail network. So connectivity of trails is going to be pretty key to that, as well as being able to get people all the way to their destinations. We do have some locations in our community where people can take part of their trip on a trail, but maybe getting to the actually to and from the business, kind of navigating through parking lots or the very last intersection where vehicles are turning into a business, that might be a little bit of a challenge. So we've put together a pretty good stakeholder group for that, and we're going to be meeting within the next couple of weeks to kind of start the process of looking at just what sorts of projects that we might be able to get in place. So we're kind of looking to put something on paper where we could have kind of a deliverable of sorts where we can see, okay, this is something where we're making tangible progress towards meeting this goal. So I think that would be kind of how we've been structuring the public outreach. Utilize our citizens participation committee to kind of put together the stakeholder group. We use that connection. We have got some people that are on that were willing to be in the stakeholder group, as well as reaching out to local cycling clubs. And that kind of built our connections. We've also reached out to some town council members, elected officials to kind of represent some of the smaller communities in Tippecanoe County. So we're really trying to get a broad perspective from a lot of different people in regards to this. So I think that's kind of mainly a good summary of what we're doing with public participation in regards to trying to build up sustainability and resilience.
Definitely.
Looks like you have a question here. Am I seeing that correctly, Ariane?
Yeah, would you like me to read that out loud to you?
Yes. Okay.
Okay,
so
I'll read that. Oh,
how do
okay.
you think the climate action plan will affect investments, projects included in the final MTP? Does it factor into the prioritization process? So I think maybe I'll turn this over to Doug to let him start to answer this.
Well, in terms of actual numbers, and then finally looking at what projects we will use or look at, we will more or less, when we start getting down to the nitty gritty in terms of looking at projects specifically and ranking them and saying these are our top 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 projects, what we would like to fund, we will definitely look at the numbers that we have come up with. We also look at other factors as well. For example, we are doing an analysis, a first to last mile analysis with our transit system bus stops and looking at stops that do not connect or are adjacent to sidewalks and trails. And then we will look at those, whether they are near employment centers, whether they are in low income, minority areas. So we don't have a specific metric in terms of weighting each project yet. We may do that in the future, but in terms of when we discuss these individual projects, we actually sit down with the city, county engineers, the small towns, and actually discuss the projects and how they impact the climate change. We will have a discussion, and then it's actually a good working group. We use this extensively in developing our project list for our tip, in that we have a good open discussion with all of them. And so far, we do include other factors in terms of rankings, but for right now, we don't have a specific math formula, or however you want to call it, to actually rank projects. We're going to first try what we've done in the past and actually talk with our engineers, and then with our mayors, elected officials, and then they're a good working group. We always have worked well with them, and fortunately we're small enough where we can actually sit in one room and have a good open discussion. So that's how we're thinking about, at least right now, in weighing the projects and determining which are higher priority than others. I hope that answers your question.
Yeah, I'd like to piggyback off that a little bit and just mention that the projects that are going to go in the MTP, we're kind of going with the philosophy of include as many projects as we possibly can, even if there isn't funding for them at this time. You know, we all understand that we live in the real world where funding is uncertain, but it is possible that new sources of funding will become available. You know, we don't know what's going to be in the next transportation bill. We don't even know what's going to be in this one. But there is definitely a possibility that some new sorts of grants or just other types of formula funding will become available, where we can do some of those projects that we previously wouldn't have thought possible. So in the MTP, we kind of just include everything in the kitchen sink, and then in the tip, that's where we really get down into really prioritizing things and making sure that we really tighten the screws on getting a fiscally constrained tip.
So at this point right now, I'd like to open the floor for another MPO to actually, especially if you have just recently completed a document within the last year or two, to type in what have you done to address climate change, so we can share with the group, and then continue this. It would be great if we could hear from everyone, and then share the ideas. For us, if we see one or two, we definitely will steal them. I'll tell you that right up front, because you know, as I said before, you know, working with this agency now for over 30 years and have met a lot of people, there are a lot of you that have great ideas, and it'd be great to hear from you. So if someone could type in the chat what they have done in their MTP, we'd like to share that. So please, feel free.
And while we wait for that, I think maybe we'll just kind of talk a little bit more about some of the partnerships we've had with other local agencies. So one big one we have here in Tippecanoe County is the Wabash River Enhancement Corporation. And they, in addition to having environmental concerns, are also very heavily invested in being able to develop trails and a trail system, really, kind of going along the Wabash River that runs through Tippecanoe County. And so finding the organizations like that in our community and coordinating with them and kind of working with them, I think is something that's really valuable. So I would just encourage everyone to kind of try to see, you know, who's out there in your community. Maybe, you know, some of the other university communities might have some kind of similar organizations, or maybe climate advocacy organizations, or people who maybe are interested in policy. Could even be local citizens that want to engage on that level and are very passionate about the topic. So just trying to find ways to find those people, I think, is valuable. And it looks like while I was talking, we got another question, so I'm going to go ahead and see if I can read that. So this question says, well, we rarely can fund tree plantings with federal funds. Does your program look at trees as an approach to mitigate mobile sources as well as stormwater? anyone else want to take that, or?
Well, that's a good question in terms of tree plantings. Actually, we are fairly blessed with two organizations, one being in Lafayette and one being in West Lafayette. I believe both of them have been tree cities or named tree cities for many, many years. I think the city of Lafayette has planted, I think they've been tree city now for 24, 25 years. But in terms of in this new MPO, our MTP, that's a good question. We haven't really looked at tree plantings. When we look at our land use side of it, we do look at, you know, where areas are still forested or heavily planted with trees or trees remaining. I know that's one thing that we did look at in terms of new alignments. We do look at where there are tree plantings. We look at also farm and try to avoid and minimize any, would you say, taking them out completely, but minimize the impact. But that's something that we probably should look at.
Yeah, that's a really good point. So kind of what we've relied on a lot with this is local ordinances. So we'll say, you know, when you have a project that you have to, you know, remove some trees or whatever, you need to have some kind of mitigation in place to replace that. That's mostly what we've done. And as far as the species and stuff, and, you know, where the trees exactly should be planted, we've mostly left that to the jurisdiction that's conducting the project. That's kind of been our approach. That's worked pretty well in the past, but that doesn't mean that there isn't room for improvement. Because like we got maybe another comment.
Just on the tail end of that, I will say that we do realize that trees are a great solution to those mobile sources of emissions. I think it's a matter of trying to find the best data collection and how to implement any plans that we may have. As you said, it may be difficult to gather federal funding. So I think we are attempting to see how we can do that with our local resources and our local groups at a closer, more intimate level.
There's two things I'd like to add. One is that in our previous last 5-6 years, local federal aid projects, we have noticed that the two cities, Lafayette and West Lafayette, and even Tippecanoe County, have actually installed trees in a project. Not sure if they tried to use federal funds for that. I don't think so, but it's nice when you see these new road projects completed that when you drive along, you do actually see trees, and it's very interesting the different species they plant. Something that's not in our transportation department, but in our land use side of the office, specifically in zoning, when we do have a request for a change of zoning and it adjacent to or abuts to a different land use. For example, if you have a request to rezone a property to a business type zone and it is next to a residential type zone, we do have a requirement that they person that's doing the request in rezoning actually install a buffer yard of various types of landscapes. And it's various different intensities depending on what the person would be zoning it to what is the adjacent zone type of that property. And it depends on, you know, what the two are in terms of width and also in terms of intensity. So if you have two different types of zones, for example, industry to residential, which we do have some, you have a lot more landscaping requirements. So that's one way that we do include not only the installation of additional trees, but also the shrubs and whatnot. So, and that, again, we do that outside of our transportation, but in our land use section of our office.
And it looks like Jerry Bridges shared with us that the use of federal funds for that purpose, as outlined in the last question, is allowed in some states. It looks like California and Maryland would be the two states currently that he knows about where it's allowed. So I guess if this is something that we want in Indiana, we got to get on board with our state legislators and talk to them and see what we can do to get a similar law, passed here in Indiana so that can become a reality.
So we still haven't had another MPO chime in to tell us what they've been doing. We'd really like to hear, especially those who've just recently completed their plan in the last year or two. Give us a short snippet of how you are taking the, this nebulous climate change and then actually trying to put it into something that we could do. So please, so if one of you could actually do that.
Yeah, we would love to hear from you. One specific thing that I think we're all kind of trying to figure out is, what we're going to do about alternative fuels. So we've kind of seen some progress in Tippecanoe County, and one place that I think that I'm really proud of where we've seen this is with our transit agency. So because Doug is our staff person who works most closely with that, I think I'll let him maybe go ahead and share just about what City Bus, our transit agency, has done in the realm of alternative fuels.
They've actually started years ago in terms of getting away from actually using diesel as the main fuel for their buses. They first started out, of course, with hybrids. And then about 5-6 years ago, they started actually going to compressed natural gas, or CNG. They have installed a specific station right there at the transit office, maintenance garage, refueling station. And over the years, they have steadily increased the number of buses that use CNG, and they are roughly at 70% right now. And the use of the CNG station is actually, they need to expand it, because what they're finding out is that yes, CNG is a lot better than diesel, of course, and they are finding out that even in maintenance, in terms of working on engines that use CNG versus the hybrid engine versus the diesel engine, that of course the maintenance for these engines are different, but and fewer and less. So at least right now, their goal is to convert the fleet to nearly all CNG. And it's interesting also in terms of electrical power for the office, and then also for the maintenance, is that they do have 3 wind turbines installed, and a lot of the electricity they use to power the shop and whatnot come from those wind turbines. So they're fairly far ahead cutting wise in terms of thinking of our environment.
All right, it looks like while Doug was explaining that, we had another comment or question come in. So this is South Bend. It says Transpo from South Bend has been using CNG for several years now. Through our Green Fleet program, one of our public schools recently switched to propane through the Volkswagen program, and another was awarded for an electric bus. MACOG has also been assisting a few of our cities with their climate action plans. So it sounds like MACOG has kind of taken a similar approach to us in that, they're partnering with transit agencies, working with other local organizations that have fleets, those sorts of things, as well as taking this approach of putting together a climate action plan. So thank you to MACOG for sharing that with us. We really appreciate that.
Is there anyone else that would like to share what they have recently put in their MTP and what they're thinking of? We'd like to hear from you.
Yeah, so we actually had a comment from Eric Zimmerman regarding a previous point. He said that the new transportation bill, the IIJA, has a new program, the Healthy Streets program, that will provide funding for tree cover. So just in reference to the previous point about mitigation.
All right, well, thank you very much, Eric, for reminding us of that. And just to kind of plug again what he told us earlier, do remember that he put together a pretty extensive document that you can find on NARC's website, which we did link earlier in the chat, so it's right there for us. So I think maybe that would be a good thing for some of us to kind of look over and try to plan out some of our future activities, especially in regards to funding, as we know that that's always a big deal. And it looks like we did have something else come in, so I'll go ahead and read this. So this is from NERPC. So NERPC in Northwest Indiana has also participated in the IU Resilience Cohort for greenhouse gases for various communities, and our performance-based planning and programming framework takes into account climate-related measures like energy mix, waste diversion rate, etc. Right, so it sounds like NERPC has kind of tried to take some practical steps there. I would be interested to kind of hear more about the performance-based planning and programming framework. Is there maybe a link online that we could share in the chat to that, someone from NERPC? I don't know if you have kind of some documentation of that posted on your website or somewhere, but if you do, it'd be great if we could drop that in the chat so that all the MPOs can take a look at that and see some of the great work that you guys are doing up in Northwest Indiana. Okay, so while we wait for that, I would like to say that kind of trying to find some of the different grants that are available for this is something that I think some other MPOs have had success with. So the Volkswagen mitigation settlement, that grant was mentioned earlier. I'm not 100% sure exactly what the name is, but you guys know what I'm talking about. So that has been one source that I know some of the other MPOs have really been able to leverage. As well as I know that there have been a lot of great programs that other MPOs have used, specifically with some of their CBAC funding. So maybe if there's anything that MPOs have been doing in regards to one of those areas that you'd like to go ahead and drop in the chat, that could be another potential kind of piece of interesting information for the rest of us to copycat or piggyback off of as we all work on developing our plans. If not for this MTP cycle, maybe some of you just finished that, might be able to be something you can leverage in 5 years when you're doing your next one.
Any additional ones? Having a hard time telling if we have new ones or not.
Yeah, it doesn't look like I'm seeing anything in the chat. Aria, have I missed anything? Any comments or questions that have come in?
So far, we are current on comments and/or questions.
Heard from several of you of Northern Indiana. What about you in Southern Indiana? Same thing, different? Anything you'd like to share?
Oh, it looks like we have another comment. So this is about roundabouts. Roundabouts can mean many things: safety, emissions reductions, stormwater, and greenhouse gas reductions. Looks like that came from Jerry Bridges. So thank you, Jerry, for kind of just reminding us also about how we kind of design our transportation network and looking at the flow of traffic. So I don't want to turn this into a traffic management systems presentation. That is interesting to some of us, but for others of us that might put you to sleep. And we're not trying to do that. We still have a lot of important information to cover. But just kind of remember that that is another tool in our toolbox where we can really kind of approach and attack some of the problems in the transportation sector.
If I could ask, Jerry, is there any performance measures or anything that you use or that your city, county uses in terms of deciding which future intersections should go to roundabouts versus just a straight four-way stop or signalized intersection?
Okay, while Jerry is typing there, I got a link from NERPC to their performance-based planning framework. That's linked in the chat here.
All right, thank you,
Sounds
Ari,
like
for getting that
it's
in the
in
chat.
their 2050 plan.
So yeah, I would encourage everyone to take a look at that when they get a chance. So it looks like Jerry has answered a question. Thank you, Jerry. So it looks like crash data and traffic volume are kind of the two main metrics that they use when they're deciding where to put roundabouts. That makes sense. Certainly a good way to go. Looks like we have another comment that just came in. It's about NERC. So NERC partners with South Shore Clean Cities, which I know other MPOs also use for clean air education. So South Shore Clean Cities, this is maybe a good time to talk about them. Although they are called South Shore Clean Cities, they recently became a statewide agency. So this is something that is available to everyone, not just our friends up north by the South Shore area. But that's something that, you know, they have some staff that have experience in kind of doing that education, outreach, putting things out on the media, those sorts of things, as well as some grant writing. So I know that some of the MPOs were able to partner with them to request grant funding from the Volkswagen grant. That was one way that they were able to leverage that grant and apply for some of those funds. But also, I think that the education piece is important. You know, there are people that are at different spots with this sort of thing. You know, there are some people who have really looked into it and really are interested and passionate about the importance of this topic. But there are other people that it's just not a part of their daily lives, and they might not even know just exactly how important some of that is. So any kind of outreach efforts that can spread awareness and maybe get people interested in and say, oh, you know, maybe it's something I need to look into more or really dig into. That's the kind of thing that, you know, we would like to see everywhere. So it sounds like there's been some success with partnering with South Shore Clean Cities in regards to kind of promoting that.
So anybody else or any other MPO would like to share what they have included in their MTP or are thinking about including or looking at to help take it from, you know, the idea that we need to really do something to what we can do? I'd like to hear from you.
Yeah, and if you've kind of used any of your other capital programming tools, like maybe you put something in your TIP, you know, we'll take that too. We know that the TIP and the MTP are certainly two very important interrelated documents. So don't hesitate to share, you know, whatever good work you've been doing.
Yeah, I don't see any questions at this time. Were you going to talk about some of the mixed use alternative transportation things like trails or bike routes at all?
Yeah, we can do that a little bit while we kind of wait and see if any more comments come in. So certainly, you know, we've kind of, one thing that we've really done is set aside some of our funding starting in, I believe, the 2040 MTP. We started setting aside 10% of our funding to put specifically to bicycle and pedestrian projects. So mostly that comes in the form of trails. That's really how we kind of spent some of that money. It's been pretty successful. I think kind of the keys going forward are going to be continuing to just improve the connectivity of the system. You know, if people can only take a trail for a mile, you know, they're not going to be as likely to use it as if they can take it for 2 or 3 miles. Especially if they want to get to certain destinations. You know, we know that more and more people are interested in taking trails and using different methods of transportation, but it's just kind of the if you build it, they will come sort of thing. And building it does take some time. But one effort that's really exciting that's statewide that I'm going to ask Doug to share about is the Big 4 Trail.
Do we, just looking, did we receive another comment?
I think we did. Let's go ahead and get the Big Four trail first, and then I'll pop into the comment.
Okay, similar to the other trails that are popular around the state, one trail that basically for now connects Lafayette to Indianapolis is what Tim referred to as the Big Four Trail. And it is basically a trail that connects or goes through smaller towns in Boone County, Clinton County, and then here in Tippecanoe County. A lot of work has gone on in Clinton and Boone counties in that a lot of the trail is already constructed, and there are basically 3 projects left to have it fully constructed, and funding was received for 2 of those, so 1 project left to have a full connection. Now it's our turn here in Tippecanoe County to not only connect to the trail, but we are also looking at extending it further to the north, following the trail system that was outlined in the state legislature group that finished up their work here a year or 2 ago, that we just recently finished identifying where it would run through Tippecanoe County, looking at smaller communities, how they're connected, looking at how we can weave it through our town, Lafayette, West Lafayette, and actually connecting it next to the town of Delphi and their trails. So when this system does get finished, we hope that it will be used such as others, such as the Cardinal and Monon. So we just finished up identifying and then having the plan done to identify that trail. So would you like to go ahead and then go to the next comments?
Yeah, it looks like we got a few comments here. I'm going to try to get through all of these. So the first one says, we haven't included much in the past, but we are thinking about including metrics for reducing the VMT and greenhouse gases and adding specific goals and objectives for climate change and resiliency. I'm not quite sure who asked that or who commented on that. I didn't get a name on that, but it looks like there are some efforts underway to work on that.
Mm-hmm.
Let's see if I can.
With that, Tim, I would just say that inclusion of as many metrics as possible definitely do enhance the plan, and having measurable goals and objectives actually helps you to meet those by putting it out there and garnering feedback on that as well. So for the commenter, adding those in, you will definitely see a benefit by doing that.
Yeah, so FHWA, I think you owe Michael a thank you for promoting performance-based planning. So make sure to send him a nice thank you note, please. But yeah, like he says, performance-based planning, we know that's been an emphasis area, and I think all of us here in Indiana are on board with using kind of some more of a data-driven approach, and that's a great practical way that we can do that by having measurables in our plans and such. Okay, so we have a comment about trees from NERPC. It says NERPC also has a Communa tree program where we have applied and got biannual grants to purchase trees twice a year to give to communities. So it looks like that grant has been able to purchase the trees themselves, and then I suppose the communities would be responsible for the planting part of it, is how I'm reading this. Looks like we have another comment. Also from NERPC, from Charles, it says, this grant is through the U.S. Forest Service, specifically the Great Lakes Restoration Fund. So that's the source of funding that they've been able to apply for. Let's see if we have any other comments. Oh, here's another one. Okay, so it says we are partnering with the local LPAs and FTA to add additional ped and bike paths as well as sidewalks to connect past bike stops. So something similar to what we're doing up here in Tippecanoe County, where we're kind of trying to evaluate, some of the amenities and just the connectivity. We know this is especially a challenge for seniors and persons with disabilities. Ken shared earlier about some of the challenges that persons with disabilities face when they're encountering work zones, but even just in their regular day-to-day lives when they're trying to use transit. It's very important to have transit accessible stops. So it's great to hear that other MPOs are working on putting those sorts of facilities in place. And I would just put in a promotion to remind everyone that it's always good to consider ADA when we're doing this. I know we do that in Indiana, but never hurts to have another reminder.
Any additional ones?
So that first comment was from Kipta. So Kipta was the one we're missing. So thank you for clearing that up. It's great to hear about what you guys are doing with Kipta. Looks like we have a link shared in the chat. So from Bloomington. So the Bloomington Monroe County MPO participated in the city of Bloomington's first ever climate action plan, which was developed in 2020-2021. We're excited to share our transportation chapter of the plan. It is incorporated into our MTO's MTP. And then they get the link. So that link is available in chat. So please feel free to plagiarize from our friends down in Bloomington. Copy their great work.
Thank you. Thank you. Is that all the comments we've received so far?
Did I miss any, Ari? I was kind of trying to go through. I'm not sure if I got them all.
So Aria stepped out a minute. This is Maureen, but yes, it looks like you've read all the comments.
Okay. So any other MPOs around the state would like to tell us their story, song, dance, limerick, poem? We would like to hear from you as well.
Maureen, if you're, not to put you on the spot, but if you're able to maybe speak just briefly about your experience on some of these topics from participating in the resilience cohort to developing the plan as well.
Well, I just jumped in, so I'm not sure what was already covered, but basically we've been doing a lot here. I'm sure Doug has shared about the resilience cohort, about Greater Lafayette Climate Action Plan. It's been really a group effort. It's not just county for us, it's working with the cities as well. There's so much to cover. I think the biggest thing we're trying to do right now is just really focusing on public outreach and how do we get the word out there? How can we get more recipients for our different online surveys, and just figuring out, what does the community want us to look at? What is our needs here? Because we know climate change is happening, but how can we help, and where do we even start as a community? Because it is just bigger than us, really. I think the biggest thing too is transportation is a huge part of this. So I know Doug has worked really hard on a lot of data needs that we had to look at for the climate action plan. So I'm sure you guys talked about that process and all of our data collection, maybe, but I don't know. Is there anything specific, Michael, that you were thinking of, or?
Actually, yeah. Just going off of your comment about the data collection, I know that was something that others were involved in a little more than myself in the beginning as I was coming on board. So if anybody is able to speak more about the actual collection.
I think that was more Doug, so I don't know if Doug, that's put you on the spot too.
Well, I mean,
what kind of data you looked at?
It was a joint effort. We did a lot. We actually had really the help of 2 interns that would send out the requests for data. I know we went through and did a lot of data gathering specifically for traffic counts, coming up with VMT, and not only just for the county, but also for the cities as well. It was a large group process involving city staff, both of Lafayette and West Lafayette. And then even before that, answering a number of questions in terms of how prepared we are. You know, we had to even reach out to a lot of other departments in the county to get those responses, which when all said and done, it actually was eye-opening in terms of, yes, we are prepared for certain things, and then maybe we're prepared for certain things, and then, well, we definitely need to look at others. So it definitely gave us an idea of what we should start focusing on to bring us up to the next level. I see we have another comment. Is that correct, Tim?
Yeah, so Jerry Bridges just says, thank you for sharing your insights. You're absolutely welcome, Jerry. Thank you for sharing some of what's going on in your area as well. It's been great to hear from you and have your participation in this lunch session. So thank you too, Jerry.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, so I think one of the things, oh, looks like we just had another comment come in. So this is from Jen Higginbottom. She said, or she asked rather, was that resilience assessment only with Lafayette or with all your LPAs?
Well, I guess I could answer that one. First off, we did one overall one for the entire county, including everyone. And then we did an assessment just for the Tippecanoe County portion. And then we also did individual assessments for the city of Lafayette and the city of West Lafayette. So we had different perspectives. And it was interesting when you compared the county information or data versus the two cities. There were differences, and basically a part of that was depending on land uses, specifically where industrial areas are located, because we have a good concentration of industries in certain locations, specifically in Lafayette. So their data, what came back to us, what we saw was different than what you would see in West Lafayette and then also in the county. Of course, with Purdue University, the largest employer, and with nearly 50,000 students at Purdue University, that data, the numbers came back were different than, of course, what the county was. So a little bit different, you know, in terms of, you know, whether it would be driven by automobiles and whatnot. So we did do look at it differently. Hope that answers your question.
Yeah, so while we wait and see if anybody has any more comments, one other thing that I wanted to address is kind of looking at emergency routes. So one thing, you know, that we do experience here in Tippecanoe County is some flooding. I think we've been fortunate in that hasn't been too catastrophic for us, but you know, we know that with climate change, that potentially could be something that we're dealing with more in the future. So kind of the questions we have to face are, you know, where are some locations where it might be likely to experience flooding? You know, what happens if we have a 100-year event, a 500-year event? So if we do have one of those events, what part of our transportation network is that going to impact? And then what do we do about that? Are we able to provide alternate routes for people still to get to different destinations? Or do we need to maybe, you know, kind of raise the elevation of some of our current routes? We did actually have one project where we did an elevation increase that we put in our tip. Maybe I'll let Doug go ahead and share about that project.
Yeah, that was a very interesting project in terms of it is a road that parallels Wabash River, and then at times when flooding does occur, that road would go underwater. The impact in terms of land use was a hospital. So the county, because this is a county project, decided that it was important to give access, or make sure there was access to the hospital even in high water events, to elevate the road, and we did use federal funds for that. It was a very good project, pretty straightforward in terms of elevation, and it went fairly well in terms of constructing. And so far, with the events that we had, after the construction, the road has not went underwater as it has in the past. But I'd like to also add, Tim mentioned emergency routes. One thing that we will look at in our next long-range plan that affects us, especially in Lafayette, West Lafayette, and Tippecanoe County, and the emergency route is what happens when I-65 closes. And we had, unfortunately, the experience of that when a portion of it was widened, and when they were working on a bridge, actually had some issues with the bridge shifting. And that closed the interstate, especially the northbound traffic, for many, many months. And the routing of traffic that would normally use I-65 and going through the communities, it was an interesting lesson learned in terms of what the official route was and what was the unofficial route in terms of what vehicles and trucks used. In that we are very fortunate to have somewhat a good connective system that would handle that, but there are certain pieces that are missing, and we are actually in the process of started a Pell study to actually look at one of those missing pieces that would really help if the interstate did close in the future.
Yeah, so maybe while we wait and see if anyone else has any comments, I would like to kind of talk about the Pell process that Doug talked about. So we're kind of underway doing our very first Pell study. I know there are a couple others that are in place in other parts of Indiana. And it's something that's been approved by Federal Highway, and NDOT is kind of just starting to integrate into their regular planning activities. I think it's something that's really great in that it helps you kind of have future projects be a little more shelf ready, and it helps make sure that you really get into some of the environmental issues, and you don't have to kind of redo some of those processes if a project sits on the shelf for a little bit. So that's something that, you know, may be of interest to some of you. If you haven't tried out that process, I think it might be appropriate. It might be good to partner with your local NDOT jurisdiction, whichever district you're in. Go ahead and talk to those folks and ask them if maybe a Pell process might be appropriate. And I think you can really get some really good information from that, and it can really improve the resilience of your network.
And
You have any more
also good for
comments?
planning environmental linkages, right? I don't see any comments right now.
Okay. Well, seeing that, should we go ahead and then close it out, Tim?
Yeah, I think we've been at this for about an hour, like Michael said. So thank you all for participating. We hope you're all still awake and that you're able to read through some of those links that were posted in chat. And with that, I guess we'll go ahead and take a little bit of a break, and we'll be back at 1 o'clock for the next presentation. So we look forward to seeing you back then. Thank you all for your time. And we look forward to continuing to see all the great work that everyone is doing around this great state of Indiana.
Great, thank you.
Thank you.